diabetologists to get newer insights into diabetes. Is it really necessary and is it really possible to keep your glycosylated hemoglobin below 7 and keep your blood sugar around 150? To discuss these issues which diabetes and diabetics have to face every day, today I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Chawla, Manoj Chawla, who runs a exclusive diabetes clinic in suburban Mumbai of Andheri. Thank you so much, Dr. Chawla, for being with us.
Sure, thank you, Anil.
Let me start at the beginning, and that is about, what kind of problems do you really face, or rather, what kind of problems do you face when the diabetics walk into your clinic? The first problem is about inhibition, as well as how do you convince them that they need to go in for treatment? Because I believe that there is a lot of inhibition amongst diabetics, especially type 1, to take injections and carry on with the drugs.
Sure. So, also let me thank you and welcome all the viewers who are seeing this, and thanks for their interest in knowing more about diabetes. I think it's always going to be useful for our cause of spreading more information about diabetes, so that the patients and families and people in general learn more about diabetes and learn to handle that.
Absolutely. Before we continue, can you also give us a quick brief background of yourself and tell us where you hail from?
Sure. So so we run the center in Andheri. I'm a Mumbai boy, born and brought up in Mumbai in Andheri. I've done all my education in Mumbai. I did my medicine from TN Medical College, Nayar Hospital, and followed by my post-graduation in diabetology from the same Nayar Hospital and Raheja Institute at Mahim.
Okay.
That was a while back, and since then I've been practicing.
Raheja Hospital is only for diabetics, right?
It used to be only for diabetes at one point in time. I think largely now it's predominantly a multi-speciality and a cancer hospital, with some part of it being in diabetes.
Okay.
So that's where my earlier training was done. I've now been practicing in this field over the last 14 years.
Okay.
I run this clinic and I am attached to various suburban hospitals. Largely, I give time to the Asian Heart Institute, and I am the coordinator for the Department of Diabetes and Endocrinology at Asian Heart Institute at Bandra Kurla Complex.
Okay.
So that's about my background and my work which I do.
Yes. Talk about
so coming to your question about inhibitions and challenges. So inhibitions, I wouldn't say are too many by the time a patient comes to see us. Coming to see a diabetologist or a specialist in diabetes, already when the patient is coming to us, they know that they are coming to see a specialist and seeking treatment.
Okay.
So obviously there isn't any inhibition, the fact that they are coming to see us.
Okay.
But if we talk largely, and I think in the population out there would be some amount of inhibition in a lot of people about the treatment. And this probably would arise from a lot of myths or misunderstandings or confusion which might exist in their minds, or they might have seen in the earlier part of their lives about a possible myth about side effect of medicine, or some complication that they saw in their families, in their parents, grandparents, and that kind of fear stays in their mind, which kind of puts them away that shall I seek treatment. Then of course a lot of indigenous medicine, herbal medicine and other sciences of medicine available, yes, claiming to cure diabetes and any chronic disease for that matter. So that kind of again is something which is special in our country, and we struggle to break that barrier. You did mention about type 1. So interestingly, Anil, type 1 diabetes and most type 1 diabetics accept insulin much easier than type 2. And the reason being, it's pretty clear. So largely, yes, it starts in the younger age, though we know today that sometimes type 1 diabetes can start in teens or even in elders and later on in life. But predominantly, yes, it starts in
both ways, right?
Both ways. Type 2 can be in much younger people today. So that there is a gray zone which exists there now. So for anybody detected with type 1, from the word go, there is no other option of treatment. Whichever doctor is treating, everybody knows that this is the only treatment. So whether it's a child or a teen or a person with type 1 diabetes has to accept that this is the form of treatment. There might be some reluctance, but there is no really going away from that. However, when a type 2 diabetic who's being treated, whether it's with lifestyle or with tablets, there comes a point in time when we know that the medications are not working, the oral medications, and such an individual requires to be on insulin. The maximum resistance comes in from such an individual who's been taking medications orally, but probably has never been able to achieve his A1C under control or keep sugars under control, and has that dangling sword of complications. It's in a much more stronger way than a type 1. They are the ones, they refuse to accept insulin, and we have to struggle there. Type 1s, there are of course completely different set of issues in terms of taking insulin. So coming down to type 1, right from taking insulin on time, eating on time, physical activity, the ups and lows which would happen in a type 1 diabetic, the struggle with day-to-day means of monitoring largely being an expensive proposition, but a requirement. But yes, I mean, if somebody is not, there are people out there with type 1 who would struggle to have their meals. So I think that's again largely a myth, Anil. About
water and
so yeah, we don't really unless the temperature is really extreme, more than 40 degrees.
Pune is probably
gets close to that. Nagpur probably will be much more than that in the summer season. However, largely the insulins at room temperature can be used for a period of month, and most of these vials and that will expire before that. They'll get used up before that. So storing it, or somebody not being taking insulin because they don't have a refrigeration to keep, is not required. Also, suppose the temperature does go high, the insulin in the bottle or in the pen will lose some amount of potency. It doesn't become ineffective. So it will lose some amount of effect, but doesn't become totally ineffective. So somebody who still doesn't have a fridge in a hot climate can still store it inside wherever.
Does that mean that it will only become saline and there will be
no, it will not become saline. I'm just saying it will become slightly less effective, less potent. So where it is supposed to do 100% job, it will probably do 80% of the job. But it will still do the job. There is no danger. So again, that's a myth that they shouldn't be taking. They should be taking insulin. If there are temperature issues for somebody who just can't afford this, they will still have to go ahead and take it when you're traveling. So it doesn't really affect it. It doesn't. So those have been long taken care of. As long as we are using it up within a month's time, it shouldn't affect.
What's the kind of patient profile that you have here?
So here we get all kinds of patients from both type 1, type 2, a lot of gestational diabetics, or which means that means during pregnancy. So a lot of those who are pregnant and for the first time are detected with diabetes, and that again is on the rise. With late pregnancies, with multiple pregnancies, with a lot of IVF, in vitro fertility, or a lot of mothers who go in for fertility treatment because they are not having children, and then they become pregnancy after a lot of treatment, which does include some amount of hormonal therapy to support their pregnancies. The rise in diabetes in that kind of pregnancies is also pretty high. So we see all kinds of diabetics coming in here, and from all stratas of society. So whether it's somebody who's barely affording to the well affording, we cater to all, and we try and treat all patients from whatever background they come in from.
Now, do you think that after 20 years of diabetes, usually the organ failure will be inevitable? There are many diabetologists who suggest that.
So I wouldn't say inevitable, but yes, the chances of complications, whether it is the so-called small vessel or microvascular complications, which means when diabetes affects the eye, the retina of the eye, or it affects the nerves of the leg, or it affects the kidneys. These are the three main small vessel complications. Or the large vessel complications, which is related to any heart disease or brain disease, or the legs, the blood supply to the legs. With longer the duration of diabetes, the chances of these complications is much higher. Right? But however, I wouldn't say that it's inevitable that you will land up. There's enough evidence which shows that if you keep your sugars under reasonably good control, the chances of these complications will come down. We cannot say that you will not get it. There is a chance that you will get it. But if your sugars, your other parameters, blood pressure, lipids have been kept under good control, the chances that your chance of landing up with complications is going to be much lesser than compared to another diabetic who has not been able to do this good control. The chances of he or she landing up with complications is much higher.
Doctor, when you talk about people having inhibition of taking
medications or insulin,
anything, don't you think there is also something called the medical inertia which is more?
Oh, true, big time. So yes, I think
how do you overcome that?
Is simply by education. So let me put it this way. When we always spoke about medication, or rather this was spoken more in terms of insulin barriers or barriers to insulin therapy. And as I mentioned earlier, type 1 there is no issue. Everybody is pretty clear that this is what has to be used. And a typical type 1, unless treated with insulin, will not survive beyond a few days or weeks.
Right.
A type 2 diabetic who requires to be on insulin, that is where the biggest barrier comes in. And that inertia is more of physician-based inertia, where a doctor is yet not sure to start insulin, or a doctor is afraid that if I suggest the insulin word to my patient, the patient will not start insulin but will change their doctor. Right? And on all these beliefs come from the fact of that fear of injection. For anybody, when you talk about introducing,
there is also a feeling among patients that if you get into injection,
then you have to take it all.
No, it also means that you are getting into advanced stages of diabetes.
So I think again, the right way to go
wrong,
is actually wrong, and the right way to go about this, Anil, is that when we start treating a diabetic, I think the best is to make them aware of what diabetes is right from the beginning when we see them. Letting everybody know that in terms of for a type 2 diabetic, what is the natural progression of disease. And when we talk about their pancreas, their beta cells in the pancreas producing insulin, we let them know that there is a certain life to which the tablets will be working, and typically that is anywhere between 10 to 15 years. After knowing that they have diabetes, that is when till the tablets will work. And then there comes a time that the oral tablets will fail to work, and these patients will require insulin to keep themselves in good control. So when we try and tell the patients this right from the beginning, and not at the stage 10 years later when they are, suddenly the insulin word is thrust upon them, it's about, in other words, informing them from the beginning, kind of priming them and letting them know that at some point everybody will require insulin, and using insulin as more of something which supports their initiatives towards avoiding complications, rather than keeping on using the word insulin as a threat. And I think that's where a lot of us have gone wrong in the past, where we have started using insulin as a threat. Oh, your sugars are high, your A1C is bad, we'll start insulin. That's a threat. You're not doing your diet control, you're not doing your medications properly, I think we will start insulin. So it's always been put across as a punishment, and that's where the perception comes in, that if my doctor is suggesting insulin, then I'm doing bad. I'm towards the end of my diabetic I'm landing up with complications, or I'm being punished. So the typical answers will come, doctor, give me 2 months, I'll change, I'll do this. And that's where we need to keep telling them, fine, you take your time, you want to change, you want to do better diet and lifestyle, it's fine. But insulin is not bad for you. If required, insulin will only help you. So I think that kind of positive reinforcement always helps.
Doctor, in every diabetologist we try to get into specifics, One thing is about, there are transplant patients who have got into diabetes, and all my questions are based on various emails that we get. Can you tell us about the kind of diabetes transplant patients would get, and is there any way out of it? Is it because of steroids that they take, and that's why their pancreas...
So yes.
Do you have any such patients?
We do have, unfortunately, and everybody who is treating diabetes will be seeing such patients. So when you talk about transplant patients, and any kind of transplant today, one, as we realize that post-transplant patients will be on steroids, and they would be on other various anti-graft or anti-transplant rejection medications. All these medications are largely insulin resistant. So they create an environment in the body where the individual's own insulin is not able to work well. So there is this environment of severe resistance created to insulin action, which leads to sugars rising and the onset of diabetes. So such patients are there. Can we prevent it? Probably at this stage, no. In terms of that when you start or when somebody undergoes transplant and succeeds, I think the bigger success story there is the acceptance of the graft and the transplant being successful. To support that, as of today, of course, you have to use these medications. But to prevent diabetes arising out of transplants, it is the onus, or rather the responsibility, I would say, lies on the drug companies supporting us with better drugs to avoid the transplant rejections, which do not have an impact on the blood sugar. And I'm sure there are plenty of them working on this aspect to give us safer medications for transplant patients so that they don't land up with rise in sugar.
I'll tell you why. Because we have a patient, his name is Raju. He is just about 18 years or 19 years. He is from Jharkhand. He went to Bangalore to do pharmacy, by the way. He took some painkillers for a long time, 3 months. So he sent us a question which is very interesting. He says, see, there is insulin resistance to your own insulin. How is that when I take insulin from outside, how is that is becoming effective?
Right. So, and then that's an intelligent question coming from somebody who understands some amount of pharmacy. So, when there is resistance to the action of insulin, we need to, one, either decrease the resistance, which happens with some drugs, or we need to give that extra dose of insulin, which is able to supersede that resistance which exists. So, which is when you start giving insulin externally, what you're doing is providing supraphysiological or extra amount of insulin, which is able to counteract that resistance in the body, and that's how it works.
Right. Now, when I started with this glycosylated hemoglobin at 7 and blood sugar at 1, is it really possible to do that?
Oh yes, it is possible to do that, and it must be done. However, the figures in not only in India but probably all across the world, the more developed nations, the more richer nations, the recent studies have shown that less than 60% are being able to be at this target of A1C less than 7. So a so-called large data coming out of something called as NANS3 study from the US about 4 years back. So that showed that almost 40% patients are not achieving the target in spite of the best of therapies. Some data from India itself has shown that this figure is even poor at about 35%. So patients being on target of less than 7% A1C, which is actually more important than that 150 figure. So that fasting or post-lunch figure can differ, but largely the HbA1c criteria is more defined and more important that it needs to be less than 7. This is not achieved by more than 40%. If I look into my own data and I keep looking at the A1C data of the patients visiting this clinic, in spite of our best efforts, I would say it's not more than 40%.